You ever wonder why some homes look effortlessly stunning while yours still feels off? Well, the truth is, most people are just missing a few simple design tricks that make all the difference. So in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to share 15 interior design tips so you can finally get that wow factor without hiring a designer yourself. So one mistake I see all the time is hanging art too high, because when art is hung too high, it loses its connection to the furniture and to the people in the room. So the fix is borrowed directly from art galleries and museums worldwide. The center of your artwork should sit exactly 57 inches from the floor. Why 57 inches? Because that's the global standard for eye level. And when you apply it consistently across your home, you create a horizon line, an invisible thread that ties every room together. And that line does two things at once. First, it grounds the furniture so the sofa and the art feel like they're talking to each other instead of occupying separate zones. And second, it leaves more open wall space above the art, which actually makes your ceilings feel taller. So go grab a tape measure right now, pick a piece of art, and rehang it so the center sits at exactly 57 inches. Now, when you're layering surfaces and shelves, you need to decide exactly how many pieces belong there. And that's where the rule of odds becomes your best friend. Because when you see 2 candlesticks or 4 books, your brain pairs them off instantly and just shuts off because the arrangement feels static, kind of like a department store display. But odd numbers, like 3, 5, and 7, they trigger something completely different. An odd grouping creates a natural center point with anchors on either side. And because your eye can't neatly pair things off, it travels across the entire arrangement, and that movement is what creates visual harmony. But here's the catch. The rule of odds only works if the pieces aren't all the same size. So you have to stagger the heights a bit and build a staircase for the eye. A tall vase as your high point, a stack of books in the middle, and something like a small bowl on the lower end. So go to your most cluttered shelf right now, remove everything, and put back just 3 items. 1 tall, 1 medium, and 1 small. Now, here's something good designers understand that most people don't. Half of design is knowing when to stop. We tend to think designing means filling things in with more layers and more objects, but that's exactly how you end up with a room that feels loud and suffocating, where nothing stands out because everything is fighting for your attention all at the same time. But negative space is the antidote. Think of it like the white space on a printed page. Without it, the text becomes unreadable. And the same thing happens on your walls. Cover every inch, and your eye gets overwhelmed and shuts down. But when you leave a wall intentionally bare, that open space becomes a silent frame, and it gives the eye a resting point, so when it lands on the focal point of your room, it still has the energy to appreciate it. So to lean into this, walk through your room and remove an object from every surface that has more than 3 things on it. You'll see how the room starts breathing easier. Now, when a room feels technically finished but still feels like it's missing a soul, the culprit is almost always texture. So start treating texture like a color on your palette because it carries just as much visual weight as paint does. Because a room built entirely from smooth surfaces will always feel cold and clinical, like a doctor's office or a 2-star hotel lobby. But what changes that is what I call tactile depth, layering materials that play off each other. So drape a wool throw blanket over that leather sofa to heal the coldness, or set a rough hand-carved wooden bowl on your glass table and you bring it back to nature. That contrast between rough and smooth gives the eye something to land on and explore. And this matters even more in neutral rooms, because an all beige palette with no texture variation just looks like a blurry, forgettable cloud. But mix in a nubby boucle chair with a smooth marble side table and a weathered jute rug, and that same neutral palette suddenly feels high-end. So pick one smooth surface in your room right now and place something rough next to it. Something like a woven basket or a ceramic vase. I promise you, you'll feel the difference. Interestingly, color might be the part of design that trips people up the most, but you can eliminate a huge part of the guesswork with a super simple idea from the color wheel, which is to choose neighbors. Think deep navy, soft teal, and forest green. If you see a room with those colors, your eye is gonna glide right through it. And that gliding feeling is exactly what makes a space feel calm and high-end. It's the signature move of boutique hotels and private libraries, places that are deliberately engineered to lower your heart rate the moment you walk in. And that's why this works so well for bedrooms, reading rooms, and any other space meant to feel like a real retreat. So pull up a color wheel on your phone, find the color that most closely matches your sofa, and look at the 2 colors sitting on either side of it. Those are generally great accent choices. So if your room looks beautiful during the day, but a little bit depressing at night, the culprit is almost always the same. You're running on the big light. A single overhead fixture that's filling your space with flat light with the same angle and intensity across the entire room. But without any shadows, there's no depth or dimension. So the fix is to layer light at 3 different heights, the way a photographer lights a portrait. Layer 1 is ambient lighting, which is your overhead fixture. Its only job is keeping you from walking into the furniture, so put it on a dimmer switch and turn it way down after dark. Layer 2 is task lighting, the lamp beside the reading chair and the pendant over the kitchen counter. These create pools of focus that pull you into specific areas of the room. And then layer 3 is accent lighting, a small lamp tucked into a bookshelf, a picture light above a piece of artwork, or just a few candles. This gives your room that sparkle. And when all 3 work together, the highlights and shadows give the room some 3-dimensional shape. So tonight, walk into your living room after dark and count how many light sources you see. If the answer is 1, add 2 more at 2 different heights. Even a $20 table lamp can have a surprisingly big impact. Now, one of the most common reasons a home feels off has nothing to do with color or style. It's just size. And the issue here is that most people err on the side of going too small because they're afraid that bigger pieces will overwhelm their room. And that can be true if you're living in a super small space, but generally what happens is the opposite. A small rug in the middle of a large floor looks like a postage stamp lost at sea, and a sofa that's too small for the room just makes your space feel cold and uninhabited. But rather than getting the largest rug and sofa you can find, what you're looking for is visual balance, where the furniture and the room feel like they were made for each other. So if you want to avoid buying something too small, before you buy it, tape out its footprint on the floor with painter's tape and live with it for a day. You'll know pretty quickly if it's too small, and often it is. So here's something that took me a long time to figure out. You can get the colors right, the proportions right, and the lighting right, and your room can still feel like nobody lives there. And the reason is that everything is matching too well because every piece feels like it's from the same era, or worse, the same store. So what fixes this is actually adding something in that doesn't belong. The old wooden stool your grandmother gave you, that slightly lopsided handmade bowl, the piece of art you bought because it stopped you in your tracks. These are the objects that break the pattern of your home. And that's exactly why they work. Because when everything in a room is new and coordinated, there's nothing for you to discover. But when there's one thing that's clearly older or rougher or just weirder than everything else around it, it creates just enough friction to make the space feel real. So look around your room right now. If every single thing in there could have been delivered on the same truck, that's the problem. So go find an object with a bit of history and put it where your eye lands first. That one piece will do more for your room than anything with a SKU number. Now, mirrors have got to be one of the most underrated tools in interior design because most people only think of them as something you check your hair in. But a well-placed mirror is actually a light source, a space expander, and a piece of art all at the same time. When you hang a mirror directly across from a window, it effectively doubles the natural light in the room. So that's free lighting with no fixture and no wiring, just reflected daylight bouncing deeper into your space. And in small rooms, mirrors also create the illusion of depth. Your brain reads the reflection as more space, which makes the room feel bigger than it actually is. But here's where so many people go wrong. They hang a mirror on a wall that reflects something ugly, like a blank wall, a cluttered corner, or the back of a door. But a mirror is only as good as what it's reflecting. So this weekend, grab a mirror you already own, even a small one, and hold it up across from your biggest window. And move it around a little bit. When you find the angle where the room suddenly feels brighter, that's your spot. Mark it and hang it there. So open plan living sounds amazing until you're sitting in one big room that doesn't feel like anything. It's not a living room, it's not a dining room, it's just space. So the fix is creating zones, distinct areas within your open floor plan that each have their own purpose and their own energy. And you don't need walls to do this. Place a rug under the sofa and coffee table and you've just defined the living area. And if the adjacent dining table sits on its own rug, suddenly you have 2 distinct zones without a single wall between them. And you can also use furniture strategically, with the back of a sofa or a tall bookshelf creating a visual barrier without blocking the light. And speaking of light, lighting changes from zone to zone just reinforce those boundaries. So a pendant over the dining table, a floor lamp by the reading chair, and recessed lighting in the kitchen. So pick one zone in your room, whether that's your reading spot, your dining area, or wherever, and give it its own light source. Because when a zone has its own light, It stops being part of the room and starts being its own destination. Now, this one sounds minor, but it actually makes a massive difference. Your curtains should kiss the floor, not hover 2 inches above it like flood pants. They should kiss the floor, just barely making contact. Because curtains that stop short of the floor are one of the most common mistakes I see, and it almost always happens the same way. You hang the curtain rod right above the window frame, buy whatever length of curtain the package says is standard, and end up with this awkward gap that makes your entire room look stunted. Now, I can already hear the comments about your robot vacuum getting tangled up, and I hear you, but if you get the right length and they're just grazing the floor, they're not going to get eaten by your Roomba. So to really nail this, here's what you want to do. First, hang your curtain rod as close to the ceiling as possible. Not right above the window frame, but at the ceiling. Because when the curtain drops from that height all the way down, it stretches the wall into one tall, unbroken line. And your window suddenly looks twice its actual size, which makes the whole room feel taller. And then second, measure from the rod to the floor and buy exactly that length of curtain. Or if you're between sizes, go longer and hem them. Now, the first 30 seconds in a home set the emotional tone for the entire experience. And that means your entryway is a pretty important spot. And that's crucial because most people treat their entryway as a dumping ground for keys, shoes, bags, and mail, all piled onto whatever surface is closest to the door. But when you walk into a space that feels calm, something shifts in your brain. You exhale. You feel like you're arriving somewhere, not just passing through a transition zone. But I'm not saying you need a grand foyer to pull this off. A small console table with a mirror above it and a tray for your keys is usually enough. What matters is that it feels deliberate. So here's what you do. Open your front door as if you're walking in from outside and just pay attention to what you see. If it's a pile of shoes and an avalanche of jackets, that's what your brain absorbs every single time you come home. So clear it out, add one intentional thing like a plant or mirror, and notice how differently you feel walking in tomorrow. Now, here's one of the fastest ways to make a room feel new without spending a ton of money. Change 10% of it. Not a full-fledged renovation. Just swap out the smallest, most visible things. The throw pillows, the lampshade, the hand towels in the bathroom, or the books on your coffee table. Because your brain is a pattern recognition machine. It walks into a room it's seen 1,000 times and just stops paying attention. But change a few small details and it perks back up. And that fresh scan is what makes your space feel alive again. I mean, this is why hotels refresh their rooms every few years. Not because the furniture wore out, but because novelty has a shelf life. So this weekend, take 3 small things from one room and swap them with 3 small things from another. Pillows, lamps, plants, whatever you choose. You don't need to buy anything, but both rooms will feel different by Monday. So this one goes against everything you've been told. You do not need all your wood to match. And I already talked about pattern breaking earlier, and that's because matching everything is one of the fastest ways to make a room look like a furniture store display from 2005. What you want instead is a conversation between woods, a walnut coffee table on an oak floor, or a light ash shelf next to a dark teak chair. Because when woods contrast, each piece stands out as its own thing. But when they match, they blur together into a flat, monochromatic blob. And this applies to every matching instinct you've got. Your nightstands don't need to be the same, and neither do your dining chairs, because the rooms that look the most high-end are almost always the ones where someone had the confidence to mix. So look at the 2 most prominent wood pieces in your room. If they're the same tone, swap one of them out for something clearly lighter or clearly darker. Not slightly different, but obviously different, because that contrast is what makes the whole room look curated. And now here's something that might change the way you think about all of this, because most people walk into a room that feels off and blame the color, the furniture, or their budget. But research in environmental psychology shows that your emotional response to a room happens in under a second. So that means that before you've consciously registered the details, your brain has already decided if the space feels comfortable or stressful. But what it's processing in that split second isn't style, it's pattern. And every tip I've given you today, from the 57-inch rule to the 3 layers of lighting, they all work because they're aligned with how your brain actually reads a room. So you're not just decorating, you're designing for your nervous system. Because the reason a great room makes you exhale when you walk in isn't magic and it isn't taste. It's neuroscience. So if you want to understand the deeper science behind why this stuff works, like what's actually happening in your brain when you walk into a well-designed room versus a poorly designed one, watch this video next where you'll learn the psychology of interior design so you know exactly how to make your brain happy no matter where you live. Happy brain!